Okay, we'll call the Public Works and Planning Committee to order. Call the roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Here.
Commissioner Cush?
Here.
Commissioner Nipper?
Here.
Commissioner Piercy?
Here.
Commissioner Sereno?
Yeah.
Commissioner Stevens?
Here.
Commissioner Jernigan?
Here.
Approve the minutes.
Approve minutes.
I so move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Highway Department.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I think I have these in the order that you have them. I have a few budget adjustments here. I'll just step right in. Well, the first thing I have is some speed limit request. We recently asked the Sheriff's Department to give us their thoughts on some speed limits on some roads that we've had some calls about, and they did. Double Springs Road, Sims Road, and Hedge Apple Road, we're going to move forward with their recommendations. It was passed at the road board this morning, so just kind of letting you know what we're looking at there.
Are these a decrease in the current
All
postal?
these are, yes. All these are a decrease.
When they're dropped, do they come and help enforce that droppage for a while, or is it just there and?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, sometimes they do. Sometimes there's a presence there after the speed limit reduction takes place, and sometimes it really kind of, it doesn't seem like there is a increased enforcement. So I think it just depends on maybe what they're seeing as far as accidents and that kind of thing. But
Ain't gonna go too fast in Arizona out there, you know.
that's right.
I'm kind of curious
You get
why,
off, you off.
yeah, why Sims Road's at 35, the agricultural traffic as it is. I mean, we lowered the rest of them to 20 and 30, but Sims is a little high to me for agriculture vehicles being on that road.
Explain how small this is, and that's just a small.
Yeah, well, just kind of,
I know it's the sheriff's department is the one that recommended it, but
yeah.
you know.
Well, the section of Double Springs Road is between the highways.
Right.
You know, it's just a short section of Double Springs there. And it kind of mimics what a subdivision road would look like as far as driveway connections.
Right.
And then Hedge Apple Road, you know, I think the entire thing is about 1,500 feet long. It's very narrow. We've made some improvements to it, but it's still narrow, and it's heavily traveled. So it does need to be even lower than what you would think a subdivision would be. Sims Road is a little more rural, not as many driveway connections.
Right.
There's not a lot of hills,
But-
curves. There is one significant, but you know.
But you do have tractors, combines, and things
Yes,
like that.
yes, and you know,
I mean, that could,
you can encounter those pretty much anywhere in this county
Right.
at any time. So I think 35 is
35.
probably reasonable. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. And we'll continue to monitor the, you know, again, if people would drive the speed limit or something close to the speed limit as opposed to, you know,
right.
20 miles an hour over, I don't think we'd have a lot of this trouble.
Well, sometimes it's like if you lower it to 15, maybe they'll do 30.
Yeah, sometimes that does seem to be the thought process, but we could all do better. I'm guilty of it
Well, you
myself.
know,
I don't know, casting stones.
True, I mean, the old adage for young people when I was growing up was, you can get away, you can go almost 10 miles an hour over the speed limit and they won't bother you. The police won't, so I mean,
Well,
That seems to
if
be.
they do, it's gonna cost you about $304, so I've heard, so.
That's true.
Got it back in the old days, you gonna do it now?
Better not get caught doing it,
Do we need a motion for
Motion,
that?
yeah, should we break these out separately?
probably.
You can do,
Well,
you're
I
doing the
mean,
road, all the roads
yeah,
together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll make a motion to accept the recommendations for the speed limits on the
Second.
roads.
Second.
Commissioner Stevens.
Mr. Stevens.
Yeah.
Good. All right.
You can do by acclamation.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Okay, moving on then. We have a budget amendment here for an increase and a decrease to our budget for some state aid road project we're gonna do. So this will be an increase that we will receive from our state aid road fund, and then it will be a decrease for the same, roughly the same amount. So we currently have $280,000 in our state aid road account, and we're gonna add to that $1,024,900 to bring the total to 1.3049. And this will be to do a project on the,
They're actually both increases.
they are both in?
Yes, because we're increasing the revenue we take in, and then we're increasing what we have to spend out in that line
Okay,
item.
well,
So sorry,
yeah, yeah.
excuse me about that. So this one is a wash.
Yeah.
Money in,
It's
money
a
out.
$1 million contribution from the state.
Well, actually, it will be more than that.
Yes.
It's just that,
$2,049,300 total.
That's total, but it's,
no, okay. We will be receiving an additional, we projected 280 in
Right.
our revenue for state aid. Okay, the job come in, we bid this in August, the job come in more than that. So the additional money, the job come in at $1,003,760.
That was low
okay?
bid.
That was the low bid. So that money is gonna be completely wrote out of the $68,726. We're going to get that money from the state as their part of the 98.2. So we're putting that in the revenue line item of state aid program for the bridge money. So we will receive in 1304 and we'll have turn around and pay out, or 1.3 and we'll receive in. So it's a wash. We gotta turn around and write out what they send us, and then the little portion, our 2%.
right.
So it's an increase across, because we gotta pay the bill.
It came in $1 million went over. I'm
No.
just curious.
No. No. Annually, we put 280,000 roughly into that account.
Not a specific job with the bids.
Right. Right, and that's enough to cover our portion of any project that we might take on. And then we count on that revenue from TDOT to cover the state aid projects that we might do. And we don't bid out a project unless we have enough money in that account there at TDOT in our state aid fund to complete that project. So, no, we never thought that it was gonna cost 280 and now it's gonna cost 1.3. Yeah, we put 280 in there to cover our portion of what, yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Kush?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Serrano?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan?
Yes.
And just, Mr. Dodd, just to increase your comfort level, this project it's very close to the same per mile cost as the other state aid projects that I've been involved with since I've been at the highway department. So it's in line. You know, it's very close to the per mile cost.
It's just
Of the other
13 miles of
projects.
it. It's 13 miles of it.
Yeah, it's just a big project.
Which job is this?
I'll say 5.
Okay.
We need a man,
So yeah, it does. It's time for sure.
Is it just a milling and topping, or is it?
Yes, it is. For the most part, it's mill and top. There's some incidental stuff that goes along with it, but it's a resurface for the most part. It's not an entire mill even. There's just some areas that need milling. The entire thing does not need milling. So, and like I said, it's in line per mile with the other projects that I've been involved with since I've been in the highway department. The cost. Alrighty.
Will that be done this calendar year?
We anticipate that unless the contractor has some unforeseen circumstances they're not aware of or we're not aware of either. That is the intention, yes. Alrighty, moving on here. We've got to do some adjustments to our highway equipment account. We're purchasing some new equipment. So we're going to have to decrease our fund balance $350,000 and add that to our highway equipment line where we currently have $50,000. So that'll bring that to a total of $400,000 to cover some new equipment that we're purchasing. That'll still leave us with a significant fund balance there. This is one of those things that we feel like it's time to do it after we see how we came in at the end of the year, and we had a significant increase to our fund balance from our leftover revenue from last year. And so we're going to go ahead and make these equipment upgrades purchases. So that'll be from fund balance, $350,000.
This was anticipated in your prior months building up to the new budget year.
Not sure I understand the question.
Well, you were planning on this purchase.
This is
months ago
part of
as your
the,
budget
this
year
was
and-
part of
and
the
your new
capital
budget.
outlay
Yeah.
that we had. But we like to kind of, we're kind of a pay as you go. And we like to see how we come in at the end of the year
Right.
before we decide how many of those needs we're going to try to satisfy. So yes, we were anticipating this, but we wanted to see how it came out as far as what our contribution to our fund ending balance was going to be.
The tractors, are they replacing tractors or just adding to the fleet?
We will be replacing some tractors. We will be replacing. And those tractors have a lot of hours on them. They get run pretty hard. They've served us well. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. All of these equipment purchases are off of the state contract. We're piggybacking off the state contract. These are not items that we had to put out for bid. We had the luxury of purchasing this stuff from the state contract.
I'll make a motion to approve the request.
Second.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Kush?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Sereno?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan?
Yes.
Now, the last thing I have this evening is a increase to make some salary adjustments. And this will be the salary adjustment and all the benefits associated with those salary adjustments. And it is $9,780. And that will come from our fund balance as well.
So this is an annual increase per employee, is that right?
No, this is for 3 individual employees.
3 individuals.
the annual increases have already been taken care of, and we're comfortable with those.
So it's 9780 times 3?
No, sir, that's total.
Okay.
Yeah,
The
that's-
9780 takes care of all three and their benefits.
I make the motion to approve his request.
Second.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Kush?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Sereno?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Jernigan?
Yes.
That's all I have this evening. Thank you for your time and consideration. Anybody got any questions over here?
Mayor Burgess does.
Mayor,
You may not have this information yet. Of course, there's been an increase in the gas and diesel tax. Have you guys got any indicator how much this may have increased? And it's a little bit early, maybe, I don't know how much lag is in the actual collection of those taxes when they hand those things over to you. I have no idea.
It appears that there's going to be about a 3-month lag. And that increase that you're talking about is going to be phased in over the next 3 years.
Right.
And as you know, it's based on projections of gasoline consumption. So a lot of things can happen that affect that.
Recycle.
For instance, Harvey, gasoline's gone from $2 a gallon to,
250 plus.
250 plus. Yeah, so that will impact sales. And so, but based on the projections that we have, we anticipate the first year to generate a little over $800,000. That's what we're being told.
But it'll be 3 months before you get your first month. Is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Well, that's good. That's going to really be very much needed and helpful.
And because it's an increase to gasoline tax, my opinion of all that is, tax increases are always difficult to sell or swallow even. But the fact that it's a fuel tax increase, the burden is not solely on the residents of the county. It's shared by everybody that passes through the county as well. So just an observation.
User fee.
Right.
On behalf of the people that live on Browns Mill Road, we thank you for the job you done on the road out there.
Yeah, you're welcome. I
Looks
appreciate
great.
it. Thank you. Well, I'll pass that on to the workers that made the effort.
Excellent job.
And they are making an effort, I promise you. That it? Thanks again.
building code.
Good evening, Commissioners. How are you doing? Everybody had a great Labor Day weekend? Building codes is clipping right along. We have issued a total of 322 permits in the month of August, 70 of which were for single-family dwellings. And that's up just a little bit from last month. With that, revenue was $117,450 for building permits. Development tax was a total of $366,000 for the month of August. Zoning inspections, we're hitting zoning pretty hard this past few weeks. We've kind of started to focus in on a lot of zoning issues in the county, so you'll see those numbers start to rise over the next couple of months because we're really trying to pick up and clean up a little bit. So our number for zoning for August was 239, up around 60 inspections.
And what's the impetus behind your
Well, we've just found in the last few years that a lot of our zoning, property maintenance, zoning and stuff has been somewhat unenforceable in the county, given, in order for us to take a case to court, we have to go through a process, a due process, a fair notice process. And a lot of times we really look to the homeowners to voluntarily clean it up. And that happens a lot of the time, but a lot of the time it doesn't. And in the past, we've really tried to take our time and try to help these people out. We'll give them a 20-day extension, then another 20-day extension, and a 30-day extension. And before we know it, we're working with them for 4 or 5 months. And so we're trying to put a stop to that kind of stuff and try and get it taken care of pretty quickly. And
So just being more assertive with
right,
policies.
right.
The specific violation that you're concentrating on, that
Property maintenance mostly. There's been a lot of our
debris and mowing, two big ones?
Yeah.
debris, mowing, dilapidated buildings in accessory buildings, not houses, as much as dilapidated sheds and dilapidated garages and storage of building materials and stuff that didn't used to be addressed. It used to be just trash, and so now we're kind of moving towards what the code really says and what it really entitles or allows us to enforce and regulate.
Is it inspector observed or public calling?
No, it's mostly complaints.
Commissioner Dodd, what I found out a couple weeks ago, which I was totally amazed at, was if it's an, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it's an owner-occupied home in your subdivision, okay, if your neighbor chooses to not mow his lawn and it grows up 5 feet tall, which I have a constituent complaining in his neighborhood with a very similar situation. If the occupant lives in the home, the county cannot step foot on that property to maintain that property, to mow. We can send letters, we can beg and plead, but that's about all we can do. If it's a vacant property, right, we can, if I'm saying this right, we can go on the premises and mow, and then I guess put a lien on the property or some kind of way to try and recoup loss. But if it's an owner occupied, we can't step foot on it. So now she's trying to get verbiage in place or corrected
Right.
that says, okay, here's your first notice. And again, we're trying to play nice, give them a chance. If not, then we can take you to court. The judge can say, hey, you either do this or the county, we give the county rights to come on your property and we'll mow it and then we'll put a lien on your home.
Well,
Or if I'm, again, correct me if I'm wrong.
we're hoping that judge will assess fines. They can assess a fine up to $50 per day, and each day would be considered a separate offense. So they would have court costs plus the assessment, the judge's assessment, which could be up to $50 per day of each day it's in violation. And then as soon as, so it'll be more of a money thing than it will be letting us come onto their property and cut it, because we don't really want to do that.
Right.
We want to encourage these people to keep their yards mowed and keep them cut.
So if your neighbor just chooses to let it grow wild, we can't really do a thing about it right now.
Right now, the way the ordinance is written, we're very, very limited in what we can do. We really rely on their willingness to cut it and work with us and cut it, so
Is there
we're
an
trying
economy
to.
of scale of the size of the property? When you, if it's a rural property that can be overgrown, is that?
I'm sorry, we're
Do you
talking
all
about,
have
yeah.
objective?
Right, we're talking about major subdivisions, I apologize.
You have
Yes, the
a-
ordinance does address major lots and major subdivisions, yeah,
I'm more confident with that.
yeah.
But that, I'm surprised to hear that.
I know, I was shocked, but we're trying to correct that. Tammy's trying to correct that.
Right.
And she may need our help as a body committee to help move some of that along.
I'm working with Josh and
Yeah.
Mayor Burgess on that, so hopefully we'll have it for you next month to go over. Does anybody have any questions on the permit numbers or?
Make a motion to accept the report.
Second.
Motion made and seconded.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning?
Evening, Commissioners. Doing well today. Excuse me. Sorry. The first thing I'll point your attention to on our report is the available lot inventory. You'll see our total available lots, again, recorded on the ground, ready to have building permits issued is 654. It is up slightly from last month. I don't remember the exact number, but we did have 3 different, what I would term larger subdivision sections recorded this last month. So any offsets that we had from building permits being issued were kind of reimbursed, for lack of a better word, with these recording of these lots. Again, this is just continuing that trend that I've mentioned over the last several months, really a year or two, that we're just going to see kind of more of a fluctuation as new subdivisions come online. We still have quite a few in the pipeline, as if you look at the next set of sheets there. But unless you have any specific questions about that, it's still rolling along pretty well as far as the development goes. We have 4 rezoning applications for your consideration next week. We did have 5 at the Planning Commission. One of those was ultimately withdrawn by the applicant. That would be the glass application. You'll see kind of the overview of that in your agenda packets, but I won't go into any detail on that just because it's not coming before you anyway. That's really more for your information. The first is by Orica USA. This is property located along 231 South Shelbyville Pike. They're looking to rezone approximately 4.5 acres of property that's already zoned for light industrial purposes. They want to zone it to heavy industrial in order to operate a facility for explosives storage. There is a letter from the applicant as well as some other materials that you'll see in the agenda packets. It's on your iPads. According to their application, the site's split into 2 areas. They have a magazine which houses explosive material, and this is material used for construction, subdivision development, those kind of things. It's kind of a storage and distribution area. The second area contains no greater than 4 tractor trailers that provide secure storage for the explosive agents. This use, as you can imagine, is very heavily regulated by ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. They have minimum separate distances that these materials have to be from each other, as well as distances from adjacent structures, distances from roads and rights-of-way and things like that. The nearest structure and road are basically a half-mile away. They're really tucked into the back here. As far as locations go, this is probably one of the best places they could find to put something like this. There wasn't a lot, there really wasn't anybody who spoke one way or the other on this at the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission, however, did have several questions regarding the use to the applicant. The applicant was present, came up and explained a lot of the regulations and different things for the particular use. Of course, this is not a use we see every day, so there were a lot of questions behind it. But ultimately, following the discussions, the Planning Commission did recommend approval by a unanimous vote. The second application is for property located along, I believe this is Blackman Road is the second application. Yes, the applicant, this is located right adjacent to where the city of Murfreesboro recently purchased property to build the West Side Park. The applicant is proposing to rezone the property from its current residential zoning classification to commercial services. They don't have any specific plans for the property this time, and so they didn't have any concept plan, and they admitted it was for speculative purposes. My understanding is the city actually was in negotiations to purchase this property, but they never could agree on a particular price. So the applicant's just kind of moving forward to sell the property on our own at some point. You can see from the zoning map that most of the surrounding area, with the exception of the park property, is already zoned commercial in the county. Most of this was already pre-existing zoning that got zoned commercial neighborhood, which is the classification down from commercial services when we adopted the new zoning ordinance back in 2013. Staff would have been comfortable one way or the other with commercial neighborhood or commercial services. After some discussion at the Planning Commission, they really just asked her about future plans for the property. She had several options, but nothing specific. There was some also questions by the Commission about proposed buffering on the property adjacent to the city park. The Planning Commission did vote to recommend approval by a vote of 8-4 and 2 against. The third application for your consideration will be property located along Sulphur Springs Road. The applicant this is located immediately adjacent to Interstate 840 and Sulphur Springs Road in that area. The applicant's proposing to rezone the property to commercial services. Again, the applicant doesn't have any specific plans for the property at this point, and again admitted that it was more for speculative purposes, but they have indicated that some possible uses that they're considering would be as a convenience market or possibly some sort of a storage facility. The closest non-residentially zoned property is about 900 feet to the east, where there's an existing Dollar General at the intersection of Leanna Road and Sulphur Springs Road. We have fielded other calls in this area around this interchange. We know eventually there will be more development in that area. Nothing has come to fruition at this point, and then this is really one of the first zoning applications we've considered at some time for this particular area. The Planning Commission did have some questions regarding access to the property, whether it was a direct access to Sulphur Springs Road. There's actually some frontage roads that are county maintained. When you look at the maps on your agenda package, you'll see that there are a couple of frontage roads that access this property. From a use standpoint, I think that the request makes sense. We do have a couple concerns, though, that I do outline in the staff and Planning Commission recommendation section. One of them is a TVA easement. The map on your iPads probably shows a little better than what the black and white copy shows, but there's a TVA easement that pretty much goes right through the middle of all these properties. So they're going to have to design around that. Now, you can put parking areas and different things like that under TVA easements. There's no line there, it's just the easement. But things like permanent structures, buildings, those kind of things, you're not allowed to put TVA once you put those under that kind of an easement. So that's something they'll have to work around. Traffic is also something that we have concerns about, especially regarding those frontage roads. Those were constructed by TDOT during the construction of 840 to access those properties. They'll have to make a determination as whether or not the thickness of those roads can accommodate additional traffic. We'll also want to see a traffic study to see if any lane improvements, signalization improvements are warranted for any kind of development right there, considering its proximity to 840. A lot of the traffic movements I can see leaving the site would be going back toward 840, a lot of left turn movements that may necessitate some sort of traffic improvements as far as maybe, again, turn lanes or turn signals. Again, from a use standpoint, we're comfortable with the request, but those are some things that we've made the applicant aware of. The last application will look pretty familiar to you. This is Thoroughbred Construction by Steve Knox. This is located on Epps Mill Road. You'll recall that just a few months ago, back in April of this year, the board approved what's called Beard Estates at your April 13th meeting. One of those conditions of the plan development and the revised pattern book is included on your iPads as well for your review. One of the conditions of that approval was that a temporary emergency ingress-egress be established along with the access to Dunbar Lane. As you recall, Dunbar Lane was the only right-of-way that accessed the property where the subdivision was going to be. So the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners wanted to see a temporary access, with a permanent secondary access to be established after 80 lots with help from the fire chief in determining how that access would be made. Since this application was approved, the applicant has been seeking a solution for the temporary access issue. They did approach the neighboring property owner about establishing a temporary emergency egress for his subdivision, but the property owner was only willing to allow the applicant to pursue a permanent access, not a temporary one. So the applicant's asking for the following. They want to rezone 2.9 acres of the 100-acre tract that's before you today from RM to PUD to add 14 lots to the overall PUD of Beard Estates along with that permanent access, the permanent road. And then amend the condition of a temporary access and add that the proposed secondary access as a permanent access point would be part of Phase 2 of Beard Estates, consistent with what's shown again in your revised pattern book. The pattern book does explain the development in greater detail. I won't go into a whole lot about that. It's similar pretty much to what was already approved. They're not really making any changes to anything as far as house sizes, minimum masonry requirement, those kind of things. But they do identify 4 phases with plans to build about 40 homes in the first phase, depending on market demand, and then this permanent secondary access would be shown as part of Phase 2. So most of the comments we received at the original public hearing for this really were in regards to access to this property, as the track only had one permanent access, one permanent right-of-way from the Buchanan Estates, which was via Dunbar Lane. This request would eliminate the temporary access, but it does provide for permanent access after 40 Lodge, which we think is, staff thinks is a good compromise. And ultimately, the Planning Commission did agree with that assessment as well. There were some questions during the public hearing regarding future connections. There was one gentleman that spoke during the public hearing. He lives further to the south on the property. He had some concerns about the remainder of the property developing, which I told him at this point, we have no plans for it. The remaining 97 plus acres would still remain RM, and if we ever see a development plan for that, we would just cross our bridge when we got to it. But ultimately, the Plan Commission did recommend approval of this as well. So I'll be happy to answer any questions regarding any of these rezoning requests before you tonight.
I'll make a motion that we approve his report.
Oh, second.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Good evening, how are y'all?
Good.
Fine, right.
As usual, we'll start with the landfill report. Of course, you see there we've been rather busy. Still got a lot of trash coming in, or a lot of debris. We don't deal with trash. And we're still doing, our contractors are still moving a lot of dirt and pushing and packing and carrying on. So at the rate we're going, the landfill's life is getting short quick. We've got with county engineers, and they've got some new equipment, and they're still running through the testing phase with that, but they're going to do a survey for us just to see how much time we do have left. And it could be close to a year, but we're waiting to see what their calculations are. And on the convenience centers, recycling centers, we've stayed rather busy. Of course, schools are back in session, so the school part of it has gone back up. Believe it or not, they've added a child or two in the school system in both of them, so they got a little more trash than they had before.
1,300.
But so far, we've kept their level of service the same. Our calculation is 30 students generate 1 cubic yard of trash per week. And most of the schools have more service than that. There's a few that have less and make do with less, but they recycle pretty well. So we're planning on trying to keep with that trend. The big push on keeping with that trend is the trash truck is 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and really doesn't have any room for growth. The recycle truck currently is 4 days a week. But to put the recycle truck, Thursday is the day we don't run a recycle route, to try to carve out a route that's efficient for both trucks is a little bit difficult. So at some point with the growth, we're going to wind up putting another truck on the street, at least 1, possibly 2 days a week. It'll be a while before we run into a 5-day week with that, but we're just trying our best to avoid that. We recalculated our cost last year, budget year before last was $114 an hour. This past year we were at $103 an hour on our truck costs. So part of that is we only bought 1 truck instead of 2. But they're staying busy. We've got some of the signage up and the stop bars up and trying to get our residents to understand why we need to change the way we operate. Most of them understand it. They don't necessarily like it, but they do understand it, and some of them just flat out don't like it. So, that's going to be a struggle.
I got a question. I'm not sure the name of the site. It's on Sheffield Highway. It's when you get ready to top the hill.
Right there at Marshall Knob Church.
Right.
We call that the Rock Crusher.
Rock Crusher? Okay. It seems to be one of the busier ones, especially when I go by mornings or afternoons. It's like they're lined up both sides of the road. Mm-hmm. Is there any plans to expand that?
No, we don't have any for it.
Okay.
The only expansion plans we have looked at is that's actually on the county rock quarry property site. And we talked at one time, and we never have done anything with it, is moving the fence back just to create more space between the compactor receiver box and open tops.
Right.
Because it's a tight space for the truck.
It is.
And when the truck's in there, if you're getting that middle compactor, then you blocked all the cars from making any, they can't even get around the truck, so.
True. And I just wondered if there's a way to point them to go on down to the Fosterville, Christiana,
Across,
because it's not as busy.
it's the least busy site.
Right. Because a lot of people don't even know it's there. I mean,
It's, we've got 2 sites that's fairly well hidden.
that's
The
one.
Almaville location is behind the Almaville Fire Department, and all the signage is behind the fire department, so if you don't know it's there, you won't find it. The Christiana Fosterville site is, you can't see it from the highway, you can see the gate and you can see the sign, but the sign is back off highway at the gate.
Right.
So if you don't know what you're looking at, you won't see it
I
either.
was just wondering if there's a possibility of putting a sign up there, or would that bring in more Bedford County traffic?
We get a lot of that anyway, but.
Okay.
We did a car count, and we're gonna talk about that here in a minute, but we did a car count, 2010, December 10th, 11th, and 12th. TDOT put the car counters, just like they put out on the street, at each of our locations. And we put it at the entrance of each one. We didn't do any exits. Like Rock Crusher only has one way in, one way out. So those car counts, you have to divide by 2. The locations that have 2, you assume they went in one way and out the other. So, you know, that's a pretty close count. If you take those 3 days and make it into a 5-day work week, Weekly Lane had 3,500 cars. Christiana Fosterville had 250.
Yeah.
And Las Casas, that Sunday on December the 12th, 2010, it snowed. You know, you would think snow would slow people down, and it did in most places, but that Sunday, Las Casas is usually about the 6th busy center. It was second busiest.
Well,
It
I
had
mean,
2,000 cars.
I've seen
that
the
weekend.
Rock Crusher be 15, 16 cars deep waiting to get in there. That's on both sides. I mean.
I've been driving the truck myself some. We're a little bit short-handed, and went out there one morning and timed it the worst possible timing you could have. Is you're headed south, you're going to turn left across the northbound lane and go up into the center at 9:30.
Right.
She had just opened the gate, and of course had cars everywhere like he's talking about, so had a hard time getting across traffic, and it still had cars getting in. When I finally got in there, it took me almost 15 minutes to get into the center. And they moved around and let me get moved around and everything else, but on my way out, I counted, there was 17 vehicles, not counting me, in that center.
Right.
And it's not that large of a center.
It's not. That's true.
But with the population growth that we're experiencing, it's going to get tighter.
Do we have any plans to put something else in near there, or?
No, not really.
Okay.
The problem with trying to put one in is everybody wants to use one, but nobody wants the next door.
Right.
And, you know, so trying to find a location, the most underserved area of the county today is the Blackman community. And when all the centers were put in 35 years ago, that was mostly farmland. So it wasn't a lot of residents out there. Well, now it's a lot of houses out there.
Yeah.
But if you try to site a center out there in that Blackman area, they're not going to like it.
No. Well, thank you
But
for the info.
the state has 2 ways to calculate the number of centers that you need in a county. If you have 95% or more curbside collection, you're not required to have any centers whatsoever. If you have 94.9 or less, then there's 2 calculations. One calculation is based on square miles. So if we do our calculations, you would take out the Smyrna Airport, Murfreesboro Airport, Murfreesboro city limits because they service their own, Percy Priest Lake. If you want to start pulling out the parks, I mean, you can take out all that's non-residential type use and come up with it. We don't go that deep into it. We take out the city and leave it at that. That's enough. But I think the last time we did the square miles, and I like using square miles because it's not going to change. The county's not going to get any bigger. We're required to have 9. We have 14. The other calculation is based on population. And I have not calculated the population and really don't want to.
Well, could the state come back and force you to use population?
Right now, in their stuff, they still have either or. And I've told them multiple times that as long as you have either or, I'm using square miles every time. But technically, there's 15 centers
Right.
within the county. The city has one, and we have 14.
I mean, you know, with
And then that's-
population growth,
That's going to be pretty close. If you did the calculation, 15 may be enough,
maybe enough.
but it may not be enough for too long. And then I want to talk about applying for grants. You want to do that separate?
Motion approved.
I make a motion to approve the report.
Second. Before we leave that issue, earlier in your report, you stated that the landfill had maybe a year. And that is to take what?
Construction and demolition.
And
That's the
when-
county landfill.
And when it closes, it will just have to go on down to Republic, is that
Yes.
right?
Right now, the other thing we take out there is tires, but we don't bury those. They're sent off to be recycling. So then when the landfill closes, we may look at still doing tires out there, but do it by, 2 or 3 days a week instead of 5, because, we don't get tires every day. And then we may look at moving it to a different location. But if and when it closes, we still got all the maintenance issues to go along with it. We're still dealing with gas migration issues, which just got a letter today. They're wanting us to step up our plan and beef up our plan and probably drill some more methane monitoring wells and some things like that, and put some, ours are just natural venting. They want us to probably put some fans and some kind of vacuum on it to see if we can make it go where we want it to go instead of letting it go where it wants to.
This is a separate question from what we're talking about, the landfills now. But have you looked into the tire center, shredding the tires? Have you furthered that down the road, or?
We've talked about it. What we've pretty much determined is Rutherford County really doesn't want one at this time. The state is still trying to find a location. They've kind of looked over in Williamson County, and they're similar to Rutherford. That's not, really don't want that in our backyard. You build it somewhere else and we'll use it. Davison really doesn't want one either. But they're actively seeking some other possibilities. TDEC has got some money available to help with some grant funding, and their park system wants to purchase, and I forgot the number, it's a whole lot of tire chips at a certain size, and there's some kind of active ingredient that they add to it, and they're going to use it in the state parks on the trails. So it looks similar to asphalt once you get it down, but it's still going to be spongy and not near as durable. It's supposed to last weather-wise for a long time, but it's not for truck traffic or anything like that. It'll be for foot traffic.
Any other question? Any motion?
We have a motion, just need to vote.
Okay. All right, call the roll.
We can do it by acclamation.
All in favor? Aye.
Okay, now we need to talk about applying for grants. The first one is going to be an easy one for you. It's called the Recycle Rebate Grant, and we've been getting that every year for a long, long time. Used to, it was the top 11 counties shared in the pool of money, and they've changed it to where it's only the top 5. And we're in the top 5. Right now, currently, we're 5th. So our portion is roughly $33,000, where it has been, 8 or 9 in the past, but we do share that with the city of Murfreesboro. None of the other cities are eligible for it. The city of Murfreesboro for the last few years has been taking their portion, and that big wood chipper that they have, buying parts and things for that. And it is a matching grant. So it's, the rebate grant roughly is $33,222, and of course we'll have to match that for $66,444. What we've been doing with the funding is when we recycle glass, we have to actually pay to have it recycled. And when we recycle electronics, we have to pay to have them recycled. So we use the matching rebate to help offset those costs. It doesn't cover all the costs, but it just helps offset. So we need to get approval to apply for that one. Do you want to take them one at a time, or we're going to talk about 4?
Just take them all together.
The next one we want to apply for is I can't find anybody else in the state that has used the grant for what I want to do, but it is eligible, and it's a measurement grant. And the thing is really intended if you have a landfill that can't meet the goal reductions, or your area doesn't meet the recycle qualifications, and we don't meet any of those criteria. It's either you need help with this or you're not getting this done. Well, we don't need help with those two things, and we are getting other two things done. So there's 4 qualifications. So we may not get it just because of those. But the car counters is what I want to purchase, and I want to purchase one for each center, and I want to purchase the computer and the software to go along with it, to where all that information gets sent back to one computer. This report that you get every month tells you how much yardage or tonnage comes out of each site. We don't have any idea how many people are bringing it in. So by doing some of those calculations, we can track, which centers are being used and which ones are not being used as well. We can look at the time of day. It may be to where if there's a certain time of day, we open at 7:30 on Saturday morning and nobody's there till 9 o'clock. Maybe we need to start opening at 9 o'clock. I don't think we're going to find that, but I think, and then we should be able to come up with some calculations on, this many vehicles versus this many tons of trash. So it's kind of an average, pounds per cubic household type thing. And we don't have any way to measure that right now. So that grant is also a 50% match. They'll grant up to $25,000. Of course, we would have to match 25, so the total project would be up to $50,000. The state thought Williamson County used the grant 2 years ago, so I called Nancy Zion. She's the solid waste director over there. They didn't use the grant. They had TDOT use stuff for them, but they don't have as many centers as we did. And TDOT had the stuff out there for a week, and they found that they could change some of the opening and closing hours at some of their centers, and they also found the centers had activity when they're closed. Ours would show that on Mondays and Thursdays when we're hauling debris out of there. But after 5 o'clock in the afternoon on, like today, shouldn't be any activity, and they had quite a bit of activity at one center late at night. What they found out was the guy that ran it had a girlfriend that he didn't want his wife to know about. So I don't care if they find that out either. The third one is a used automotive collection fluid grant. It's intended for motor oil and antifreeze. The equipment to go along with it. It would be similar to these carports that you see people buy and put out. Just the metal post and the tin roof, something similar to that, but it would have to be enclosed on 3 sides. And then the storage tanks, the secondary containment for those tanks, a trailer with a tank on it, the pumps, the signage, used oil heaters to use the oil, something to use the oil with. Depending on how many things that you pick out of each of those, like each one of them, you could get a trailer. We don't need a trailer. We need 1 trailer. We don't need 6. So the way this is set up, it's up to $65,550 per site. And then, we're looking at 6 sites. But we wouldn't ask for grant money for everything on each site. We would need the little building and the containment and the storage, the electricity. There's also funded in there that I think it was $4,000 for a project manager to build that. We don't need that either. So we want to look at possibly getting 6 of those and scatter them throughout the county.
Is it a matching grant?
Yes.
How much?
50%, 50-50 match.
And this is to collect used motor oil and antifreeze? Will there be any revenue coming back from this?
When fuel prices were high, then you could sell that motor oil and get money for it, and it's like 30 cents a gallon. Right now, nobody's been able to sell it. The antifreeze, they actually got in there for filtration to filter it. The antifreeze, if you filter it out, you can reuse it. I don't know that you could sell it. I'd be willing to give it away.
What do people do with it now versus using it at home?
If you have it now, you can go to Walmart or any of the places that you would buy oil and filters, and a lot of those chain stores will take up to a gallon from you. The state is pushing for us to ask for these because we're the only large county considered large county in the state that does not have one. But there's places for it to go other than the household hazardous waste. You know, this year we're going to get 2 household hazardous waste events, and if it's fairly well used, then we'll probably continue to get 2. Normally we just have 1 in November.
So it'll cost us roughly 200,000 in the match.
I don't think we're going to ask for that much.
You said there was 66,000?
That,
And
yeah,
we're gonna get
that's,
6?
it's up to 66,000, and we won't ask for that much 6 times.
But if we ask for the whole thing, you're talking 400,000, we'd have to come up with 400.
He said it's 50%.
Yeah.
Now, I've been told by one person at the state that there's no match on this, but I've got to check on that. I don't believe that, especially for us. You know, some of the smaller counties, I can see where they would not have a match.
We probably would be wise to try a couple of 3 of these and see how it goes, see how much we're actually collecting before we make the full investment.
But we don't need one at every center. I just don't think that it would get used that much. And then the 4th grant is, would like to apply for a convenience center grant. The state has grant money out there available up to $100,000 to build a new convenience center. So I'd like to apply for one of those.
So if we apply for any or all of these, and we're granted one or all, the fact that you're granted the grant, are we bound then to take it, or can we refuse the grant and say thanks but no thanks?
We can still turn it down.
Okay, all right.
The process is would have to turn in the grant application by October. Then they would review and let you know if you got it. You wouldn't actually get any funding until they say January 1, but it won't happen on work. It'll be the 1st of January.
Okay.
And then you've got until the end of December to execute the grant.
All
Get
right.
all your stuff in place and get it checked off on and everything else.
So it makes sense to apply for everything you can. If you get it, then we decide again.
The convenience center grant, if the only county that I know of is going to apply is Giles County. They applied last year for 2 and got them, but they didn't have any. And then they're planning on applying for 2 more. There's $1 million in funding at $100,000 per grant. So that tells me there's 10 grants out there. And only 2 that I know of being asked for. They're not really intended for a large county like us to apply, but if we're
the only ones.
Yeah, if we're the only one applying, we might get one.
Yeah.
But you get 100,000 towards one convenience center.
Toward a new one or toward like upgrading
No,
existing?
no, it's got to be a new one.
It's a drop in the bucket, isn't it? What it costs to
Well,
create.
the one that we've been talking
No,
about,
significant.
yeah, the one that we're talking about, it wouldn't surprise me if it costs close to $100,000 to do the site prep work. By the time you bring in the utilities, the 3-phase power, you get all your beds in, and of course you've got all the new stormwater requirements and all that, and then the fencing and the structures and all that to go along with it. This 66,000 automotive grant would tie in with that. If you're building a new site, then the 66,000 applies to a new site. The existing sites is not that much money.
So your Rockville one would count as a new one. So it's like finding money in the street almost.
And then if and when we ever move forward on the Florence Road, and if we actually do a convenience center there at the corner of Florence and Singer, then we'd try to apply for another one. But that's, I don't know of any other place that we could possibly get one sited. But I'd like to get permission to apply for these 4 grants.
I would make a motion to, so moved.
So,
Made in a second.
I think
All in favor?
Any other questions?
What else you got?
Hopefully before too long, we will have another meeting with our SWAC committee to
Yes.
try to determine what we're going to do there. There's some options out there that's available, anywhere from waste to energy to doing nothing. which doing nothing, it's basically still doing what we're doing, but it's still gonna cost more. So we've got to figure out what direction we're gonna go. You know, siting another landfill in this county is gonna be almost impossible. And I think the county commission kind of determined that several years ago when we had the Guy James property, and that's what it was bought for, and we sold it. So another location would be really tough. But if we did go waste the energy and decide to spend that money, you're still gonna have to have a landfill. Not everything gets burned. So transfer station is probably gonna be one of the first things that we need to look at pretty seriously to be capable of taking it somewhere else. And if we put one somewhere on the south side of the county, in a garbage truck, loaded garbage truck coming through downtown Murfreesboro, is about a 40-minute drive. So it would probably be advantageous to have one down there, even if it was just sending it to Middle Point. If we had one down there, Bedford County would probably use it as well, because they're making that same drive that we are. Bedford, or City of Shelbyville would not, because they're putting it in a transfer trailer truck to start with. Cannon County's doing the same thing. Coffee County's taking theirs to Ethel Springs, which goes to Decatur, so I don't think they would come this direction. The City of Murfreesboro, their routes on that side of town would probably use it as well. And then, some of the private haulers or industry haulers may or may not. But trying to find a location for that, the transfer station really needs to be in an industrial area. It really doesn't need to be just out in the middle of nowhere. And it needs to be really, really close to a very major thoroughfare. The Guy James property, sited for a landfill, a good piece of property with a lot of dirt, no way to get to it. You have to imagine truck traffic trying to get to that piece of property. Any other questions? Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Adjourn.
We'll adjourn.